Hi everyone. I am so excited to have all of you here and also to be bringing on Chumi Friedman from A-Time and the A-Time Hug program. I am really just excited and looking forward to having this conversation with Chumi. A-Time is the premier organization for infertility, and they help hundreds and hundreds and probably thousands of individuals throughout the world. And this is such an honor for me to be able to have Chumi here. I'm waiting for her to come on, so as soon as she comes on, we'll get started. If anyone has any questions in the meantime, please, you can drop them. She actually just joined, so she'll come on in a second. Please drop them here in the comment box, which you see on the bottom, and we will address them during the live. Here she is right now. I love technology. It's absolutely amazing. The fact that I can sit, hi Chumi, I'm just so thrilled just to be able to sit here in my house. You're sitting in your house. I'm going to adjust this here a little bit, and the fact that we can have this conversation and have so many people watch us and be able to respond. It's really just technology. It's just amazing.
I want you to know it is kind of mind-boggling that I'm still young enough, old enough to remember when fax machines were the latest technology. And so this is just, it's amazing and it's wonderful. And it's great that we're using it in the best possible ways.
Absolutely. So what I wanted to do is have you talk about A-Time and talk about its programming and the origins and the kinds of things that it does now. But I think before we do that, I think it would be maybe helpful for everyone to know how you and I met each other through the Chesed Leadership Training Program, through Cindy, how you and I have developed this really beautiful working relationship through the time that we've known each other, and I'm extremely thankful for that. But so you tell a little bit, I'll tell a little bit,
right?
We'll add in.
So it was very funny because when I had my interview, for the leadership cohort, and Cindy said to me, you would be representing the third pregnancy loss program. And I said to her, unfortunately, if we had 10 of them, we still would not be supporting all the people that need to be supported. And I remember and trying to remember the name of the other person who did the interviews, but they were floored, totally shocked at that statement. And I said, we don't understand. As much as we all do, and as much as we think we're getting that message out, for some reason, and I think you see that, we're coming up against people who say, I wish I would have known. I felt so alone. I didn't feel supported. And we think we're hitting everybody. Like, how could we not be hitting everyone?
Right.
And yet.
Right. And so just to go back so everyone understands, so the UJA in conjunction with Turo, and someone actually commented about my voice, just saying that they couldn't hear me as loud as they heard you, Chumi. So if someone could just comment, make sure that you can hear me. So the Chesed Leadership Training Program is this beautiful coordination that happens between the UJA and Turo College, the Turo College School of Social Work, where they bring together women from all around the tri-state area who are running organizations or are heads of organizations, heads or co-heads of organizations, nonprofits or other gemachs. And what it does is that it gives them nonprofit training, and it gives them the ability to network with other individuals who are working together really in this field, and how women often don't have a voice in these kinds of situations. And so it's this beautiful program of networking of all these individuals. And so now Cindy Darrison, who we'll tag later on, so she's now running her fourth cohort. It runs every winter, and the first cohort, she had Maki Claristenfeld from Kinefayim. The second cohort, she had myself, and at that point, I was part of Nechama Comfort. And the third cohort, she had you as part of A Time and A Time Hug. And that was exactly what you said, how we even with all of the work that we do and all of the organizations that I've profiled and still have yet to profile on this page, there is still so much work to do.
I want you to know that I spoke to somebody. We're doing, A Time is doing an event in Highland Park next week. And the night before, and it's not a hug event, it's from our Chava division, which we'll talk about. The night before our event, there is a small, local, just starting pregnancy plus, and I called, and I called them, just to touch base. And it was clear. She said to me, I felt so alone. She said, I was going to a support group in, I think she said Teaneck, and she said there was no other religious women there. And I just felt like nobody got me. And I hung up the phone afterwards. And it made me feel so sad because we think we're hitting everybody, like how could it be that she felt so alone and isolated and unsupported? So yeah, so that's why I think it's wonderful that you're doing this, and I hope that more women should need it. But as long as women need it, they're getting the proper message. So.
Right. That's always what I say. I always say my most fervent wish, all of my davening is that I shouldn't have to do this work anymore. I know you do exactly the same because we've talked about this, and everyone in this field does exactly the same kind of praying. We hope that we don't have to do this work anymore. But if we do, then we hope that we try to reach as many people as possible.
Right.
So tell me more about A Time. Give me the background. Give all of us the background. Tell me more about your direct responsibilities. Tell me.
So A Time started, the A Time journey started about 30 years ago. Bronnie Rosen and her husband were a young couple who were not getting pregnant. And if anybody can remember 30 years ago, there was no one to talk to. There was absolutely no medical guidance when it came to this area, reproductive health. Emotional support, forget about. There was no emotional support for anything in those days. But, and they went through a crazy, crazy day of finally getting a doctor. They got to the doctor's office, train bus, got to the doctor's office. The doctor had died and clearly wasn't seeing patients, and then found out that he wasn't even the right doctor. It was another doctor by the same name that they were supposed to be seeing.
Oh, gosh.
So they got to see that other doctor, went to see that other doctor, and he said, I can't help you. I can't deal with whatever your issue is. And it was that day, as they were doing all these crazy things 30 years ago, that they said, this doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that there's no one for us to pick up the phone to, no one to talk to. And they made a promise that if they would be helped, they would make sure that no couple ever struggled in the same way again. And Baruch Hashem, they were helped. And they started A Time. People always ask what A Time stands for. So it's a Torah infertility medium of exchange, because they had to hide the word infertility. So it became A Time.
I actually didn't know that. I've known about A Time for, it feels like a gazillion years already, and I had no idea that it actually stood for something.
Yeah, they had to hide. They had to hide the name. They couldn't use the word infertility. So much so that when they started their first support group, again, 26 years ago, 25 years ago, there were only 2 publications that would take an ad. The Jewish Press, which was a given that they would take it. And interestingly enough, the Yid. So the Yid is a Satmar publication. And everybody said to Bronnie, of course they're taking your ad. They can't read English. They don't know what you're advertising. So Bronnie called them. She wanted to be sure.
Right.
And she said, do you understand what we're advertising? And they said, yes. And she said, then why are you taking the ad? Nobody else is taking it.
Right.
And she always says she never forgot what he said. He said to her, Mrs. Rosen, doesn't every Kita Aleph student, every first grade student learn that Sarah couldn't have children? So if the Torah could talk about it, right? So that if the Torah could talk about it, why can't I talk about it?
Wow.
And that was mind blowing for her.
Wow.
And that's how it began. In those days, Bronnie was the helpline. She'll tell you, she answered the calls. She made the medical referrals. They marched with resolve. They got
Wow.
into advocacy right away. That was
Right.
very strong for them right away.
And
And
still
then,
is an incredible piece of what A Time does.
yes, advocacy is really, really important to us. And Baruch Hashem, we have been blessed to help thousands and thousands of couples have babies. So much so, sorry, I'm just gonna hang that up. Give me 1 second.
All good.
The other phone. And so much so that Rabbi Rosen announced at last year's Shasathon that there were now second generation babies because those babies that had been born have gotten married. And it's just like a continuing, journey, which is just amazing.
Wow.
So that was infertility, which is really still very much its core.
Can I just go back to one thing to ask you for a second? When
sure.
you said that there were 2 publications that took her ad for A Time, 25, 26 years ago, and you said that definitively, of course, the Jewish press would take it. Why did you say that? I'm curious.
Well, because that's always been the paper's mandate. In my other hat, I am the editor of the magazine section at the Jewish Press. The paper's mandate has always been, we don't hide. Whatever the community needs, we're here to be open about it, to talk about it, when there were many conversations that nobody would have in the religious community. We were having them already. So it was a given that the Jewish Press would, especially for something like this, like why would you not, help someone?
Right.
So that was A Time, and basically that's what we were doing. And then, of course, when you're talking to couples who are challenged with infertility, you are going to come up with loss, whether it's failed cycles or actual miscarriages and stillbirths. And I think it was about 16 years ago, Bronnie delivered a baby who was born still. And there was no one to talk to. There was no one to ask questions to. The basic questions, I'm not talking about medical guidance because she had a phenomenal medical team, but it was emotional support. She didn't have anyone to talk to. The halacha questions, can you hold the baby? Can you see the baby? Burying the baby, naming the baby, all of that. And then she had children. It was Erev Pesach, and her kids were expecting her to come home with a baby. And it was, how do we tell these kids there isn't going to be a baby? And she realized there's no one to talk to, no one who knows. And so she said, this doesn't make sense. And then leaving the hospital empty-handed was just, and she said, no. So at the very least, we have to make sure that people feel supported, that no one has to leave the hospital empty-handed again, and that there's a phone number, there's a resource, there's someone to call. And that was really the beginning of HUG. They didn't form it into like its own division until much later, but that was really the beginning.
Right.
Of HUG.
And just so that people understand, people who are not specifically in the more orthodox sects. So there are when a child is born, and a child is born that is not living, so is born still, there are a lot of aspects of Jewish law that come into play in terms of when to bury the baby, how to bury the baby, whether the baby should get a name, whether the baby should not get a name. And there are so many decisions that parents need to make on top of all the emotional upheaval that they're feeling in regard to this baby who they thought they were going to carry home, a baby who was living. And so now they're not only grieving the loss of their baby sort of in the immediacy and the trauma of it, just finding out that this baby is no longer in existence, but also they're being forced into making certain kinds of decisions, obviously with the help of their own rabbi, but and to make all of those decisions in a sensitive way, in an appropriate way, in a clear-headed way is obviously an extremely difficult thing. And so the fact that look, you have to, I think so many of these organizations come out of some form of personal trauma, right? Like Ronnie started A Time because she and her husband were struggling and there was nowhere to turn.
Right.
Then again, I mean, I actually didn't know the origins of the hug piece. So again, the fact that she had a stillbirth, again, then that was another aspect. There's
Right.
loss everywhere, and specifically loss when you have a stillbirth. And a stillbirth, for everyone, is a baby that is over 20 weeks gestation. So
Right.
really is over about 4.5 months old gestationally inside. And who do you go to and who do you turn to? And so,
Right.
I mean, it's amazing what A-Time has done.
Yeah. So, right. So that it is, and all of the aspects of that, and the continuous learning and understanding and processing. All of that is very much a part of the hug program. The other other divisions:
what does HUG stand for, by the way?
Hope, understanding, and guidance.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I knew there had to be letters beyond that. There had to be that stood for something, just based on the fact that A-Time, now that I just learned, also stands for something. So
yes.
okay.
So it absolutely does.
Yeah.
So 2 other divisions that they have. One is Chava. So the Chava division is the focus on reproductive health. When you are dealing with infertility and with loss, as you know, people call you for a variety of reasons that may not have anything to do with what you believe to be your specific mission.
Right.
But they were getting calls on a regular basis from women who were not struggling with infertility, not struggling with loss, but had polyps, fibroids, tumors, staining issues. I'm 32 years old. My doctor says I need to have a hysterectomy. All the variety of women's health issues, teenage girls, fertility preservation, whether it's egg freezing for singles, whether it's pre-cancer, all of this was showing up at our door. And it was, our helpline people, they're so used to doing infertility, but we really need to train people to answer these questions. And so they named that division Chava, after the first woman. After Eve. So it's Chava. It doesn't stand for anything else but that.
Perfect.
And really, one of Chava's mandates that we've really been focused on over this past year is we've been going into communities and we've been doing educational awareness events. So we will, fly all over the country, and they've been incredible evenings, just amazing. We actually did one in Lakewood last week that was standing room only.
Wow.
And we will be next week in Highland Park. We're going back to Lakewood. We're going to LA. We're going to Houston, I think Dallas and Houston within the next couple of months. So that's really been, very, very much.
So why do you think it's standing room only? Why is it that, I mean, look, these topics are so important and need to be addressed in the community at large. I mean, actually, I was just doing a little bit of research. So there is someone that I grew up with. I actually grew up in Lakewood, and there is a woman that I grew up with, Shoshana Keats Jaskol, who is part of actually one of the founders of this organization called Chachmat Nashim.
Yes.
And she just started this massive publicity campaign in Israel with billboards all over the country, announcing to all different types of women in all different communities, saying you must go get checked for breast cancer. Breast cancer is not a dirty word. It's not something that we should be ashamed of. It's a part of our bodies. And there are women who are dying every single day in the more closeted sects because they're afraid to do anything in regard to their body. And so I'm just wondering what your thoughts are about that, and whether you think that any of that piece sort of relates to why you have standing room only in your events.
It's interesting. A woman came over to us. One of the doctors who spoke in Lakewood talked about pelvic pain, what it is, what it isn't. And a woman came over afterwards, and she said, in 5 minutes, he said what it took me a year and a half of therapy to learn. And because no one ever told her certain things, she just assumed certain things and thought she had some sort of emotional issue.
Wow.
And she didn't. She had a physical issue, but she didn't know about it.
Right.
So I kind of feel one of the things that we say on our flyers is, come ask the questions you didn't even know you had. So, and it becomes very much people say, I never thought about that. Is that really a problem? No one ever told me. Who's it? I never like to say, who do we like? We can't blame anyone.
Of course.
We did an event for college teachers. I remember last year in Muncie.
Yeah, college teachers are teachers who teach new upcoming brides, girls who are engaged, all about the different laws of Jewish purity, ritual and purity.
Right. So one of the things we were talking about was just at lunchtime. We were sitting with a bunch of college teachers, and we were talking about teenage girls and what they're taught, what their mothers teach them, what they're taught in schools, what they learn from their friends, and sometimes the misconceptions and why don't we talk to girls honestly and truthfully in a very, very respectful and modest way about their bodies? Why do we? But we don't. Right. We don't. Where does it come from? I don't know. Right. I don't believe it's Torah based. It's not.
Right. Right.
It's just not.
Right. And why don't we also, because I think also one of the reasons why this shame and stigma surrounding infertility and loss also comes into play because we're not having these conversations with women before they get married. We're not saying infertility happens to 1 in 8 couples and pregnancy loss happens in 1 in 4 pregnancies, which means that if you're trying to build a family and you're in some of these sects, the reality is that you're probably going to have a miscarriage at some point in your fertility journey. And that it's not that it takes away the pain, because every baby is a wanted baby in most circumstances.
Right.
And so you look forward to having that baby, you dream about having that baby, but to sort of have in the back of your head this, you see my Band-Aid, this is my Band-Aid.
Yeah.
as it's flashing in the screen.
Right.
To have in the back of your head the knowledge that that miscarriage is something that happens, and when you play the odds of having more than 3 or 4 or 5 pregnancies, that probably you will have one, and so maybe the shock value is a little bit dampened. I don't know. Conversations I have all the time, and I don't know what the answer is.
It's very funny. I think back to my first pregnancy was a loss. Married a few months. I just lost you. Hold on one second.
Okay. No problem.
No, now you're back. Okay, I didn't know if I pressed something. Okay. So, I was 19. We were a bunch of young couples who got married at the same time. And everybody was having babies, and I found out I was pregnant. And everybody in my family knew. I'm the oldest grandchild on both sides. There was just like a lot of joy and and then, there was no heartbeat. And I think back to, how did I feel? Did I feel guilty? I don't think I felt guilty. I definitely blamed the doctor, and it wasn't her fault. But there was this sense of so much was taken from me. That feeling of so much was taken. When I speak to young women, there is this, somehow or another, it's my fault. And I've tried to analyze where that comes from. So I think it's twofold. My fault is because we are taught that a mother's job is to protect. So if I lost, and we use these words, we use miscarriage, which means a mistake. Right. We use loss, which means, I lost something. Yes. Right? So I'm at fault because I lost it. Right. So then these young women feel it has to have been something I did, right? Because otherwise, what? It was completely out of my control. And if this is the first time you've experienced any sort of trauma, and how do you process this? And I feel like we're going in 2 different conversations because my mind is jumping 10 steps ahead. Okay. But, right, so it comes from the guilt of I should have protected. And number 2, if I'm not at fault, then who is?
Right, then what?
And then what? And if no one's at fault, right, then number 1, how do I function? Right. With no one being at fault. Right. And number 2, which I think is really a key component for very religious, and I just don't mean Jews, but anybody who is very religious and God-centered, if it is beyond my control, then it's God's fault. And I don't know what to do with that,
Right.
because am I allowed to be angry at God?
Right.
Am I allowed to feel betrayed?
Right.
I don't know what to do with these emotions that are now directed at God. So it's much easier for me to just blame myself. So I'll put all of that negative emotion and feeling onto me, because that's easier.
Yes, it's what's so fascinating, and you and I have discussed this many times, but what's so fascinating is the fact that these concepts exist in the general population. It's not only in our little, corner of the Jewish world,
Right.
or even the general Jewish community. These are conversations that women are having worldwide.
Yeah.
I think it's, the first thing you were touching on, it's the terminology that we use. We talk about, like, how did you lose a baby? Why do we
Yeah.
talk about a baby being lost? The
Yeah.
baby isn't lost. You know exactly where the baby is. The baby doesn't have a heartbeat anymore, but the baby isn't lost. So
Right.
and then, if you flip into, okay, well, if we're not going to use the colloquial terms, then let's use the medical terms. But unfortunately,
Thank
the
you.
medical terms are not much better. They're in fact worse, because
Yes.
then when in the medical terms, a baby without a heartbeat, or a baby who never developed a heartbeat, is called a missed abortion. And the word abortion has so many layers and so many aspects to unpack, and it's so difficult for people to even work their way around that. So people don't talk about the medical terminology. They just use these more general terms, and those terms aren't helpful either.
Right.
So we certainly, it's funny because it's not really funny, but I remember when I was doing a lot of the training to learn about how to support families who are going through this.
Right.
It was an organization called Resolve Through Sharing, and I'm sure you're familiar. And there were, one of the sessions were about was about the aspect of talking about loss versus lost.
Yes.
And so, and how to put both of those in context, and when you're talking to a family, and they're
Wait, hold on one second. I lost the volume.
okay, no
I
problem.
don't know what happened.
I can
Hold
hear
on.
you. I can hear you.
Right. I
Let's
can
see.
hear you too, but it's like I lost the speaker. Hold
Okay.
on. Hold on.
So I'll just keep talking, or maybe
Yeah,
what
you
we'll
do
do
that.
is maybe you can also jump off and then jump back on if you need to too.
Yeah, I may have to do that. Hold on. Yeah, because the volume's not coming. So how do I get out? X, and then I'll come back in.
Okay, so I'm gonna click you out and then come back in. Okay. She's now out, so we're just having a few technical difficulties on Chumi's end. But basically, what we were talking about is just this aspect of sort of shame and loss, and how do we talk about these things within our community, and the terminology that we use can be so triggering. We let's see, she's coming back on now, so we should be fine. Let's just check. Thank you all for being so patient. We all, technology, here she is. Technology is sometimes a little funny. Great, but funny.
Right.
Okay, so we were talking about this terminology, and then you were talking about just sort of the shame and the feelings that we deal with in the general community, that it's not just us, that we that everyone seems to have the same kinds of feelings in regard to losing this baby. How we feel at fault. And what's fascinating for me also is the fact that there are, I mean, you know this, you see this in the lay literature, you see this in newspapers and magazines, you see, celebrities talking about it, you see it coming out in different organizations, or different individuals are talking about this on social media. And talking about this, what I mean by this is infertility struggles, or the fact that they've miscarried a baby or had a stillbirth. And the piece that's always just interesting for me is that every single time one of these articles come out, or another public figure talks about their experiences, it's almost with this like shroud of shame. It's and but we're doing it a lot, meaning it's not like 5 years ago or 10 years ago or 20 years ago or 27, 30 years ago when Bronnie started A Time. We actually are talking about these things as a community, and yet even in the general population, it's almost like, okay, I'm going to make a big announcement now. I need to tell you about my big dark secret. And my big dark secret is that I struggled for 3 years to have a baby.
Yeah.
I don't really, I don't know how to understand it.
So I was thinking about this last night. So I think it's twofold. So number one, for a lot of people, and especially people who are not going to be so public. So somebody who's not a celebrity or a social media influencer, right? The average person.
Yes.
So I think the first level is, I don't want to be the subject of someone else's conversation. I'm not interested. And in my head, when I was thinking about this, the Seinfeld episode, if you watch Seinfeld, the episode with Elaine.
Not all of them, but yeah, tell me.
With Elaine and the shoes, the Botticelli shoes.
Okay, I don't remember. Tell me, and for everyone else also.
Stop afterwards, but somebody makes a comment about Elaine's shoes. Okay. And Elaine says afterwards, why are my shoes the topic of someone else's conversation? And on a much grander scale, it's, first of all, I don't want to be a nebuch. I don't want you pitying me. I don't need your pity. So I don't want you talking about me. So I'm not telling anybody because I don't want their pity. Number two, because everything having to do with reproduction is a topic that we don't talk about. We don't talk about, except for in some places they talk about everything. But even there, they're still dealing with that. So there is this intrinsic sense of what I have to do to have a baby. I don't want to talk about it with you. This is personal. This is private. And especially when you're coming from an orthodox sensitivity or a very orthodox sensitivity, there is this element. This is what we teach our kids. First of all, everybody teaches their kids today. Your body's private. No one's allowed to touch it without your permission, right? No one's allowed to. So we do all of that. And those are good things. I'm not saying they're not good things.
100%.
Right. We need to. But it carries out later into even talking about it. Even talking about it is, besides the fact that it's painful for me, is if I talk about it, you're going to know what I did. Or how can I talk about this? So I think it's like a double layer of, and if people felt that nobody was going to pity them, right? I think people have this misunderstanding of, I'm empathizing with you and I'm pitying you. I don't pity somebody who has loss. My heart may break for this person who has had loss, but it's not pity. Like, what am I pitying her for? She's not a nebuch. She's not a sad case. Right. She's, a happy, vibrant, a productive person.
Right.
So it's not, but I think we don't always understand. We don't understand our own feelings and emotions, which is a whole separate topic. So how can we understand someone else's if we can't understand our own?
Right.
So I think it comes from those two places. But when we get stuck in the privacy, we can't reach out for help.
Right. That's the key.
And
yes.
And that's the thing. What struck me, any of you who followed the whole discussion on Swaddleby last night, which I give her so much credit.
Amazing. Yes.
I thought it was amazing. Yeah.
Yep.
One of the things that she posted is a woman talked about her miscarriage and that nobody knew. And she said, please don't use my name. Nobody knows.
Right. That was heart-wrenching.
Yeah. And I was just like, but you didn't do anything wrong. Why is this?
Right.
Again, if you don't want to tell anyone, you don't want to tell anyone, but not, this is somehow means I'm at fault, but you're not at fault. You didn't do. People ask us all the time, why did this happen? Why did I have a loss? So obviously there are a variety of medical tests that we can, attempt to do. But as you know, sometimes it's unexplained and we don't know. Right. So I'm trying to remember where I was going with this. So one of the things I always tell people is, yes, Kabbalistically, we have of a whole variety of reasons why unexplained loss happens. All about the souls and what it means. But at the end of the day, this is something that is a natural part of creation. Whether you believe there's a creator or not, this is a natural part of that inherent, of that process. It was built into the fabric of creation. It's the only thing that makes sense. Because when something's unexplained, yes, they're doing a tremendous amount of research, and maybe one day but even with all of those studies that they're doing, so when something is so unexplained, so then it has to be a natural process. And if something's a natural process, then I didn't do it. So if I didn't do it, I have nothing to be embarrassed about. I have nothing to be ashamed of. I have nothing to feel guilty about.
Right. It's an amazing way to look at it. I mean, I think that, look, as we all know, right, that for every individual family and every individual person, there are different pieces that they hold on to as being their truth, as the thing that helps them to work through the emotions of grief, because grief is all consuming and horrific. Bless you.
Yes.
And for some people, I mean, that's actually a thought that I've personally never thought about before. The fact that if you sort of remove yourself, I think it goes along a little bit along the line with that. This is part of the natural order of things, exactly as you were saying, that miscarriage happens. For a second, so we're back.
Yeah,
and if miscarriage happens in 1 in 4 pregnancies, or infertility happens in 1 in 8 couples, then this is a natural order of the universe. And so therefore, you can feel sad, and you can feel angry, and you can be upset, and you can feel like the entire world is against you, and everyone else is moving on with their lives, and everyone else is having their families, and you're not. But the shame piece comes out of it. The shame piece. And that's actually a very, it's a brilliant point.
Yeah. And I will say that the one thing we can do as a society is make it clear that there's nothing to be ashamed of. And I think most people don't even realize what they say and how they say it, and how it makes the couples feel as if somehow it must be your fault.
So tell me, what do you mean? What do you mean?
Like so I don't understand. When are you going to have a baby? Be quiet.
Right.
Be quiet.
As if also it's in your control also. Like,
sure. I want you to know, it's very funny, because on a completely different topic and yet the same idea. So we have 4 children, thank God, and all 4 are married. And people will say to us all the time, "Oh my God, you're so smart. You got rid of them so quickly." I said, what? We didn't do anything.
Right.
We didn't make this. There's no magic formula. I can, though if I have one, why aren't I sharing it with everybody? But that's not like that. That's the way it happens. If you want to believe that that's how God played it out, but if you don't, okay, but that's how it played out. Oh, it's the same thing here. Unless a couple is actively looking to postpone having children, then it's complete.
Which some
do, right? That's a whole other conversation, right. And that's good. But then it's nobody's fault. It just, again, you want to believe that it was done by a creator the way we do, we're here to talk to you. Right. But if you believe that that's the way it happens, whatever it is, we didn't do it. If we're trying, so why would you say something to someone? Why would you make a comment to someone about their family situation? Some of it I think is from a culture of now everything is everybody's business. So if everything's everybody's business, but really, we need to be taking a step back and just thinking before we open our mouths. And is this going to be harmful? Is this going to be hurtful? Why bring up?
What do you think? What do you think? What can we? I mean, besides having this conversation, besides you doing your work, I'm doing my work, we're all doing the same work. Besides that, what else? Like, does A Time have a program that specifically tries to address sort of the supporters or the people around or the general community? Like, what else can we do or do you do that we can try to address all of this?
So it's interesting. We do have a monthly support for mothers of couples experiencing infertility.
Okay.
Because,
so the grandmothers meaning.
Right. Yes, because that's a very, very important component. A lot of times the most hurtful things are being said by those closest to you. We also did, like, now before Pesach, I think it was, we did 2 teleconferences for parents on your kids may be coming home for the holidays, and we did one for loss and we did one for infertility. What do you say? What do you not say? How do you navigate? What's acceptable? What's not acceptable? So I think it's a matter of reminding people over and over and over again why one needs to remind an Orthodox Jew who has an obligation to not say things that are hurtful, but we do. We have to anyway. So I think it's just that is key. It's the support. And again, we always say, pick up the phone and call us. We will help you navigate this. And a lot of the calls we get are from family members saying, what do I do? What can I do? What can I say? What can I not say? And I always laugh because, Amy, I'm sure you felt this way also. I think to myself, I have to tell you. Right. Like, it doesn't come second nature to you. Right. And Brownie always says to me, we live this, so it's second nature.
Correct.
But when it's not, right. So I think that's...
You know, I actually love those calls when I get them because it means that the people are thoughtful and they're caring and that they're thinking in advance of something that potentially is going to be, you know, something that is going to be difficult, and they want to figure out the best tools how to navigate it. So you're right that half of me always says, like, I because I live this all day long, I don't understand why everyone else also doesn't know how to have these conversations. Right. But there's another piece of me that actually really loves it because I think, yes, I've gotten one more person to pick up the phone and call me because they're worried. And I take that worry. I know you do too. That worry actually is it means that they're thinking. And if they're thinking, we've already won the battle. And we know that that if something even comes out that affects the couple in a way that they hadn't intended, the people who are thinking are much more likely to backtrack and say, I'm so sorry, I didn't realize I hurt you. That wasn't my intention. Please, you know, let's try again. And that's really what these relationships are about. Because look, I do this work all the time, and there are times that I put my foot in my mouth,
of course,
because we're all just human. But I immediately know how to recover, how to come back and say, actually, that came out wrong. I apologize. What I really meant to say was this. And so because I have the language and I do this, so I actually really love those calls.
No, I agree. You're right. It's very funny. We discussed once doing which we didn't talk about at all, which is medical personnel. We discussed once doing an empathy conference for medical personnel because it makes such a difference. And I remember somebody said to me, oh, please, the doctors who are going to come, you don't need to tell them. They just want some extra tools, but they're the ones who are already being empathetic. No. So, but I will tell you that another thing we send out with our loss packets is a CD that's called Hugs That Help, which was a teleconference that we did years ago. Not so many years ago, but we did a while back, which was for the general public on pregnancy loss. And we include it with the packet. And we have gotten calls from people saying, can you please send me more? Because there are other people in my family who I think need to hear this. Yes. So that is very much about, how families should be navigating. And we've also done conference calls where we did one, Brownie did one once with the whole community in Waterbury. Wow. Someone had a loss. And the community as a whole reached out. Wow. I also had a situation, 2 different women called me within the same week. They worked for the same place. They worked in the same office, and they both had late-term losses. And I ended up speaking to the supervisor about how the office needed to navigate, because interestingly enough, both women, which makes a lot of sense though, both women had different reactions. And one was, I'm okay if people come over to talk to me.
Right.
And the other one said, no one had better say a word to me. And I had to sit on the phone with the supervisor and discuss what she was going to tell the staff
Right.
on how to navigate with these two women.
Right.
So there is a lot that can be done and should be done. And communities should reach out to say, okay, how do we navigate this? What should we do? What shouldn't we do? And that's really, you know, when a woman tells me something that was said, and it's, let's say, her Rebbitzin who said it, and it was just so hurtful and so painful, and so came from a place of not really understanding, because someone who has not lived it
Right.
may not truly, especially, I think anybody can understand a stillbirth, can understand the pain.
Right.
Of a woman who has
course.
born a child, right.
Right.
Or a baby who is born and then dies shortly after. That's a pain we can all process.
100%.
But the pain of a miscarriage, of an early loss, when you aren't visibly pregnant, and so most people, if you've never had it, you don't get it.
100%.
You just really don't understand it.
100%.
And that's, I think, where the most important education has to come in, on those early loss levels, because even spouses, it's like, okay, it's been a week, so why aren't you over this already? I'm over it. I'm back to work. I'm functioning. Why aren't you functioning?
100%.
Or the mother who says, you know what, I had this and I didn't do what you're doing.
Correct. Why aren't you out of bed yet? Why are you still at home? How come you didn't come to the wedding last week? How come?
Exactly. The wedding last week, we had a story that Yonina Kaufman tells many times. She got a call. There was a family wedding, and one aunt didn't go because 20 years ago, around the time that this child who was getting married was born, she had had a stillbirth.
Wow.
And she couldn't go to the wedding. And the family was angry at her that she didn't go to the wedding.
Oh gosh.
They were calling because they were angry. And Yonina sat with them on the phone to address this. Don't you understand how much pain she never dealt with? She never dealt with her pain. Everybody just ignored it. But now she can't.
Right.
So there's so many layers and levels, and yes.
Chumi, look, you and I think could probably talk forever, and I think this is just the beginning of, you know, multiple conversations that you and I will have. But look, these are important issues. It's very important for all of us as a community to not only, you know, we ourselves, when individuals and families are going through something themselves, to feel the support and know that the community supports them, but also for everyone around them to also be sensitive and to reach out. And I'm so glad that for all of the programming that A-Time does, and through the Chava program, through the regular organization, through the main organization, through HUG, and through all the different pieces that you offer, just such a breadth of services that people can turn to you for. It's just an incredible address for people really to go and know about.
It really is.
Look, this is part one. We'll do part two sometime in the spring, and we will continue talking. In the meantime, if anyone has any questions for Chumi or myself, please feel free to message us directly or call Chumi, and she will answer you directly. And I think also just as you mentioned the lost packets, I think I just want you to talk for one more minute just about those, because I think that that's also an integral piece of what the HUG program does and is so important. And I don't know that everybody knows about them. So just as we close, if you could tell people about that.
Sure. So it's a very, very sweet, pretty box that I always tell people basically says somebody cares about me and somebody thought about me. It has a lot of self-care. It's a very big focus on self-care. So there's chocolate, there's slippers, there's a coloring book with gel pens, there's a CD with songs, there's magnets with sayings, and there are two booklets. One is filled with articles that are really about, some of them are funny, some of them are sad. It's about self-care and just how do I navigate through this. And then there's this, and that one's completely in English. And then there's one that's half in English and half in Yiddish, and that's called Physic Letters. And that is letters written by rabbis and rebbitzins on just what it means and how to, from a God-centered perspective, how do we navigate? How do we follow through with this? How do we continue on now that we have lost? So all of that is in the package, and I mentioned chocolate because to me, I always tell women, please take care of yourself. It's one of the things I always say, eat healthy, drink a lot of fluids, and please have chocolate because it's really, really important. So there's a really yummy chocolate bar that anybody could eat because it's a really, really good hasha. So that's really key for that. And we also have just recently, we added for fathers, one is a DVD with interviews with 5 men who lost children at various stages, whether it's a miscarriage, a stillbirth, a baby who died. So it's really interviews with the men on a variety of emotions. And then when we have, it's called a Mekhtav Preda, which is a letter of separation written by a father who lost a son who was born still. And that's in Hebrew and in Yiddish.
Wow.
We don't have it in English because it's so powerful in the language that it was written in that I'm afraid of what we're going to lose in this translation. So we haven't attempted to translate it yet. So we send those out for fathers. And we also, when it's unfortunately a stillbirth, we have a bag that we add besides the packet, which has a blanket, it has a journal. It's just like it's an extra level of comfort. It's what we send with our doulas when they go out on calls. So
and correct me if I'm wrong, these packets are free that people
free.
That people can call
Absolutely.
you or they can go onto the website and they can request one of these packets, and these
Yes.
packets are free.
And they're free and they're sent all over the world. We sent one to China 2 months ago. Wow. They go everywhere. So.
It's incredible. Chumi, thank you. Thank you for this conversation. Thank you for the work that you do. And may as we started off the phone call, may our work not have to continue anymore. May everyone who wants to have a child, may they have their family as soon as possible. But if they do need you or myself, then they know where to go. So thank you so much.
And thank you very much. This is, I was thrilled when you started, and the way this has grown in leaps and bounds, it's such an important piece that it's a resource that stands outside of organizations. And I think that's really important because sometimes people are afraid of reaching out to an organization because they think maybe there's, a certain way of doing things that's not going to work for them. So that there's a resource that's outside of an organization is really, it's a clearinghouse, and it's an amazing, amazing thing that you have done, and we should do it for good things.
Amen. Thank you, right. And we'll continue talking next time in this
week. Thanks. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.